Welcome back, guys. Nice to have you here. We have the hand trap tier list for the month of December. Also for the month of January, obviously, we were getting a new selection pack with the super heavy samurai stuff. And if that will significantly change the meta, I will do another updated video there. And one specific hand trap that we will talk about will be better than if we have super heavy samurai running around on the ladder. But we will talk about this in a moment. We have the must-have category, which are basically hand traps that you must have in your main deck because they are just that strong. Then we have the side deck question mark category, which obviously we don't have a side deck here in Master Duel, but these are cards that you would put in a side deck because they are not as strong as the tier 1 hand traps, you could say, but you definitely want to have them for a lot of situations that they can be very, very useful in. Then you have specific hand traps. These are hand traps that you would not just put in your side deck because they can be good in variants of matchups, but these are hand traps that can be good in a very specific format, in a very specific meta, but not in this one that we are talking about, December and January at the moment. And then we have bad hand traps, which are hand traps that normally you will always find a better alternative for, so you will basically never ever end up playing these, but we will talk about this and see whether any hand trap of these will fall into this category. If you disagree with my opinion, or if you do agree, please let me know in the comments. Write what you think of this tier list. Where would you have placed things differently? Let me know, guys. I'm always interested, and let's just hop right in. We have the Chaos. I always want to call him Chaos Ruler, which obviously is a must-have, should be a staple in every deck. No, of course not. This is Chaos Hunter, not Chaos Ruler, and in specific metas, this can be very nice. For example, in the Runic meta we had back in the days, or it was the Sprite Runic meta, I think, where everyone was playing Sprite Runic back when Sprite freshly came out, and everyone was on Sprite Runic. This definitely was not a bad card, because if you have this on your field, no one can banish cards, which means a Runic spells cannot be activated. So this is a very specific hand trap. It's not a bad hand trap, especially because it has a lot of attack and stats in general, so it can survive and keep the effect on the field, basically. So this is not a bad one, but in this current format, it's definitely not very useful at all. Though it's not a bad hand trap, it's very specific and definitely not a must-have, and also not a second category hand trap that you would want to have in the current format, right? Then we have the two banished guys here, the DD Crow and the Shifter, which can be very, very meta impactful. First and foremost, the Dimensional Shifter. The DD Crow is also very nice, and back in the days when we had the Tier Lemons format, and we at the moment had not the Bistials around, which are here, this definitely was one of the best hand traps, and you could definitely put this in as a 3-off in every deck back in the Tier Lemons format. But in the current one, I think it's not really valuable. We still have Kashtira running around, which these banishment hand traps don't really do a lot of against. Obviously, the other decks that this can be nice against, for example, this could be nice against Purely, removing their quick play spells from the grave that they want to target with their Black Cat, for example, the Delicious Memory. But also keep in mind that, at least in my opinion, let me know if that it differs for you. On the ladder at the moment, there are not a lot of Purely players running around, and against other stuff. I mean, this could be helpful against, for example, Mech. So I think this is definitely more useful than is, for example, the Chaos Hunter, which is very specific and has like one single really good use case that I could think of when it comes to the current meta here. But I think the DD Crow can be quite nice, can also remove stuff from Anadium, which you don't always see on the list or the ladder that much. Not really great against Vanquish Soul, unfortunately, but as already said, can be nice against Purely and also against Mech. Against Brandon Despair, this can also be quite nice, as you can remove, for example, the Albion that got dumped into the graveyard, so it could activate in the end phase, or maybe remove a Fallen of Albas that then your opponent cannot resummon with the Quem, or you could also remove a Ctasia, for example. So if we would have a side deck, I think this could be a card that would go into a side deck, though there are definitely better ones. And talking about a better one is the Dimension Shifter. I think Dimension Shifter is a card that I would, that might sound crazy, but if your deck can play Dimension Shifter, then you should play Dimension Shifter, because it's just so strong. And you can see this with Florent Reese, which basically throughout their complete lifetime have always played the Dimension Shifter in the main deck, just because it's such a disruptive hand trap, right? Of course, we are in a format at the moment where there is still, I've talked about this, where still Kashtira, so this is definitely a situation in which this is a bit worse, but other than that, this is just so strong, so impactful, and for decks like Vanquish Soul or Fluandereese or Exosister, I would always say play this hand trap, though obviously if you're only facing Kashtira, if Kashtira is the best deck on the ladder and everyone is playing it, or there will be another banish type deck in the future that definitely does not care about Shifter and plays Shifter itself, then obviously you do not play this in this format. It would be very bad. So in this format, I think is a must-have in the sense that if your deck can play this hand trap, you should play this hand trap. Obviously, this does not mean you as, I don't know, a branded player or you as the Manadium player should start playing a Shifter. That would be very bad. Coming to the next very interesting one is Droll and Lockbird, which a lot of people are playing at the moment, and I think it's a very interesting one. The funny thing is, with Droll and Lockbird, one of the best hand traps, obviously no big surprise here, Maxi will obviously end up in the must-have category, but you have not heard this from me. We will look at this later, but obviously this has a lot of dis-synergies with the Maxi, as if you play a Maxi and then you play Droll and Lockbird afterwards, or vice versa, I guess, then you will not be able to draw cards from your Maxi, which is very bad. So these hand traps are a bit anti-synergistic and you always want to play your Maxi, so that's definitely one thing that makes Droll and Lockbird weaker. I always think of Droll and Lockbird as the Maxi of the TCG, right? Because Maxi is definitely, not only, I mean, Maxi is way better, but one of Maxi's main uses is to keep combo decks in check. Because if I Maxi you and your combo deck, you can then not go and summon like 20 times to go to your end board. And so that is basically what this achieves. Same thing with Droll and Lockbird. If I Droll you and you have a combo deck, then in most cases you will want to search more cards to be able to play your combo. So they achieve a similar thing, I would say, though obviously there are also combo decks that don't need to search a lot of stuff, and in this case my example is not that fitting. So is Droll and Lockbird a side deck card or is it a must-have card? I think it's a bit tricky to say. When we get the Super Heavy Samurai format and a lot of people are playing Super Heavy Samurai, this could turn into a must-have hand trap if you have space for it. I think at the moment it is one of the best side deck cards, so cards you could consider. As I already said, if a lot of people start playing Manadium and then also Super Heavy Samurai, and maybe also Mefmec is another good example, though Mefmec can also, let me think about this, you go, depending on whether you have your Circular on your starting hand, this can be very great against Mefmec or can be very meh. Against Purely it's nice, it can be quite good against Kashtira. It's a really nice one, though because of the anti-synergy with Maxi, I would not place it in the must-have category. Yeah, let's talk about Effect Veiler. Effect Veiler is one side deck card if there ever was one. Definitely not a card that I would put in my main deck ever, because why would I? But this is basically another copy of Infinite Impermanence if you want to view it that way. So there can be or could be a meta in which the Imperm effect is really great, and then you can put in more Effect Veilers so you have additional Imperms if you want to call it that. I think it's not a very specific one. I think it's a good side deck card, though in this current format I cannot really think of a situation in which I would say, oh, I definitely want an Effect Veiler in my deck. Though having one, if you have space for it, is always nice. So if I, for example, have my Ash, my Maxi, my Imperm already in the deck, I can't play a Shifter, and maybe I'm not the biggest fan of Droll, then I might put in as the next hand trap the Effect Veiler. We have Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, which maybe not a few don't even know this card, which already says a lot about this card. If your opponent summons a Link monster, then you can draw cards equal to the number of link monsters your opponent controls, and I think you have to like return cards +1/+1, so equal to the link monsters your opponent controls +1, and then you have to return cards to your main deck as many as the number of link monsters on your opponent field. So you basically can, let's say he has 4 link monsters and you can draw 5 cards, and then you have to put back 4 of them, right? So you can keep 1. This is quite nice because if your opponent plays a lot of link monsters, let's think for example of Mefmec, they can play a lot of link monsters, but I think in the current meta this is the only strategy that is really utilizing link monsters a lot. This can be quite nice, as you can like look at a few different cards that you draw from your deck and then decide which ones are very useful. But I gotta be honest, if I play Phantasme, why wouldn't I just play Maxi, which basically draws you cards all the time? So I think there's never really a situation in which you would play Phantasme in your main deck, because you have your Maxi, you have your Ash Blossom, mostly your Imperm, which we'll talk about in a moment, and then there's just not enough space for this. Also, maybe in a format where there is one best deck that everyone plays and it's a very link-heavy deck, right? Then it could be the case that you go Phantasme here, but I think all in all, Phantasme remains in the bad category, especially because we have Maxi in the game, right? We have Ghost Bella, also a very specific hand trap here, which in the current format has some nice targets. For example, the Mathmax Super Factorial can do some stuff when it comes to the branded cards. But other than that, I think it's not that great. I would not even put it in the side deck category, as these are cards that I would prefer having in my side deck if I would have one. That's how I want to think about this. If I would have a side deck, what would I play then? I would prefer these here over a Ghost Bell, but I think definitely Ghost Bell is better than Chaos Hunter. Then we have the Moonlight Chill, which is basically a bit of an effect veiler, but different use case of effect veiler, as you can only use this when your opponent special summons, but you can also use it during other turns than the main phase. And then also, if this card leaves the field, then there is like damage. The opponent gets damage for the amount of attack the monster had. In my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, here's the wrong saying, but correct me if you see this differently. I think this is just worse than effect veiler. I think it's a worse card. So I would honestly put it in the bad category, as I would always prefer an effect veiler over this card here. There would need to be a very specific situation meta like that requires this card here, also in the current meta, not really impactful. We have Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, which, yeah, this can be a very nice one if, for example, everyone is playing let's say we had this back in the day when everyone was playing tier. I think in a format where there is one best deck that a lot of people play, this can be quite nice, because people were just putting this in here and then putting a Kit Colors in the extra deck and then ripping their opponent's Kit Colors by banishing, or by, I think it's banishing or sending to grave. I think it's banishing. By banishing, never used this card by the way, by banishing their own Kit Colors, which obviously is really impactful, really nice. But the question is, do you want to put like 3 Ghost Reaper in your deck instead of 3 Ash Blossom? And then it really becomes a difficult question, and difficult questions to ask, to answer, in my opinion. So I think this can be nice. I will not put this in the bad category, as there is no other hand trap that basically fulfills the same role than the Winter Cherries here. But I think it's very specific, and in this current format I would not play this card, because we have a very variety heavy format which has a lot of different decks that are good. Then we have the girl that gains life points for every special summon monster. You get the attack points of this. Honestly, I think this is just a bad hand trap. I cannot imagine a single format in which this would be a good one. I think the only like scenario I could think of, maybe you can think of something else, or maybe there were formats in the past that I don't know of that this card was good in. But I can imagine a format in which there is a deck that basically kills you on the first turn by burning you, and this is the best deck in the game, and it has to do a lot of special summons. Then this might be a good counteract to this deck, but I don't know how long it would take Konami to just get rid of one of these decks that I'm describing, because obviously a deck that just burns your opponent in the first turn is super unfun and would definitely hurt Master Duel, and will result in players dropping. That's not what Konami wants, so that will not be a deck that they are creating, or that will be banished immediately. So we have the Imperm here, and this is, in my opinion, the first really must-have card. Imperm is just, I don't know, this card is just amazing. It's one of my favorite cards, to be honest, because it's just so versatile, right? This is the only thing that you can use on both players' turns very effectively. You can use it if you are going second, can interrupt your opponent. You can use it if you're going first. You just set the card. Obviously, no, you cannot do this with effect veiler, but and you can also use it on your turn if there is nothing on the board. So a lot of times you can, for example, hold your Imperm if you can guess what your opponent will end up on with the board, and this can basically negate one complete card. So if your opponent ends up on, maybe you have interrupted him before and you can see that he will end up on a Baron, then you can just keep your Imperm in the hand and don't interrupt him any further, and then it's your turn in the draw phase. You just Imperm the Baron and then you break the board. Imperm is just so useful, so versatile. while it's a bit sad that they have implemented this feature where you can see the imperm column, a friend of me talked about this, and I definitely have to agree with him. I think it's an expression of skill to remember this column, and I really like it that, for example, obviously in the paper game we still have it. I think they should not have implemented this, as this is a really cool core mechanic of infinite impermanence. Really strong, has a good use case against basically any deck in the current meta and in every meta, so it's just a must-have in my opinion. We have Neiru, the primal being, which this is definitely a hand trap that is not bad right now, though I would not call it a must-have. I would put it here at the top of the side deck category. You can definitely play this, and if we will see a surge in super heavy samurai players, then this might end up in the must-have category, because they are comboing a lot, they are summoning a lot, and then this might be a really good one. It's still a good one, don't get me wrong here, but there are also decks that don't really play into the nib. For example, Vanquish Soul does not summon a lot of times. Obviously, against Vanadium it's quite nice, but nobody is playing Vanadium. Pearly can also reach its end board without a lot of summons, so I'm not super convinced. You have decks like Labyrinth, which this is basically useless against, and you cannot relegate it to a side deck because there is simply none. So I think Nibiru just is not, or is rarely a card that I would always put in the main deck, right? It's definitely one of the best side decks cards, but you could play it in the current meta, but I would suggest that you play the other cards here in the top row in the must-haves, minus the Dimension Shifter, of course. Only play this if your deck has the capability of playing this. Then this should be a Pyrami Gear Gamma. It's represented by the driver here. Also a really nice one, really impactful if you put your Access Synchro Stardust together with your Baron package, and or maybe also an Omega if you want to. Then you can also, if you activate this on your turn to maybe negate a Maxi, you can also straight go into the Baron, and that's just the power play of power plays, obviously. But there are a lot of situations in which this card is just not great. It's really nice in Labyrinth, as they don't really need to summon monsters. Obviously, they want to summon monsters, but you can forego that and just place your traps, for example, and maybe wait a turn until you summon your Lady Labyrinth, because you can also summon her on your opponent's turn if you activate a Welcome Labyrinth or a Big Welcome. So it's really nice in this deck. All in all, I think it's a very specific one, but it's one of the best specific hand traps, and I would definitely put it at the top here. I would not want to have this in my side deck all the time. As not all decks can play this card. So for example, every deck could play an Effect Veiler and be okay with that, but not every deck can really effectively play Gamma. We have the Skullmeister here, which I have to be honest with you, I quickly have to check what this card even does. Skullmeister, I have downloaded the picture of him, but I'm not quite sure. When there's a card effect activating in the graveyard, you can put this to the graveyard and then you can negate it. Okay, so this is a good example of a card that you just have a card for that's better, and that's the Ghost Spell. So this is just a power crapped hand trap in my opinion. Then we have the Bestials, which are definitely a very powerful hand trap. Obviously, Magnamut representing all of the Bestials here. Though, if you want to play a Bestial hand trap package, you would then play a Magnamut and probably one Drewsworm if you want to go like a small package. But yeah, the Bestials. I think at the current moment, in the current format, it's okay. There will be better formats. I would not call this specific. Will I put it in a side deck or specific? The thing is that at the moment there are not a lot of targets that you can very effectively hit with your Bestials. Obviously, they are a resource generating engine in themselves, and if you can get your Drewsworm out, for example, Drewsworm can be good against any deck, but the hit something in the grave to get it banished effect is definitely, so for example, against Kashira, against Vanquish Soul, there are targets against Vanquish Soul, for example, but not really super impactful. Just comparing this to when we had the Tier Elements format, right? So I would say this at the moment is more of a specific hand trap, though it's one of the best ones in my opinion. Obviously, decks like Dragon Lane just want to play this because it's an engine card there, it's not a hand trap there, that you have to always keep in mind. And then obviously we have the last ones remaining, Maxi and Ash Blossom. I think the only question remaining is how to sort these, but I think this is also not very hard. Maxi is just the best hand trap in the game that we have. This is also the reason why Ash Blossom is the second best. I mean, Ash Blossom is just a great one in general, and basically every TCG list uses this card, but especially the fact that Maxi is around makes this one of the best ones. I think then we have the Impermeer and we have the Shifter at the end, which is a must-have for decks that can play it because it's just that great. Even in this format, I would play the Shifter. So this is my list here. Let me know, and now it's your turn, in the comments what you think of this is. What would you have placed differently? Maybe you disagree with my bad category here, but to be honest, I cannot really think of a time when any of these cards were played against me. I think Skullmeister was once played against me, but I think I've never seen these 3 cards on the ladder in like over a year playing Master Duel, and that I think says it all in my opinion. But let me know what you think of this. Thanks for being here if you were here to the end. Really appreciate this. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell, as this helps me out a lot, and we will see each other in the next one.